Welcome to the Jeff Lewis Trumpet Podcast, Episode 4.
This is the Jeff Lewis Trumpet Show with your host, Jeff Lewis, where we talk about music, jazz, and all things related to the trumpet.
All right, thank you so much for tuning in today. Today, I'm excited to have my very first guest on the Jeff Lewis Trumpet Podcast, trumpeter, trombone player extraordinaire, Joel Behrman, who is a fantastic jazz, funk, soul, R&B, all-around fantastic trumpet and trombone player. Joel originally hails from St. Louis, Missouri, and eventually ended up at the University of Miami and has recently been the musical director for pop superstar Philip Phillips. You can also find him touring with Sheila Escovedo, a.k.a. Sheila E., and occasionally with her father, Pete. Joel has also toured extensively with the group Casey and the Sunshine Band. He has also performed with various artists such as Natalie Cole, Bobby McFerrin, the Four Tops of Temptations, the OJs, Gladys Knight, Boz Scaggs, Etta James, Tony, the Funk Brothers, Barry Manilow, and Josh Groban. Be sure to check out Joel's solo album entitled Steppin' Back, which he released on his own label, and you can find that on his website at joelbehrman.com. So, without further ado, here is Joel Behrman. All right, everybody, thanks for tuning in today. Today we have a very special guest. This is my good friend, Joel Behrman, and one hell of a trumpet and trombone player. Thanks for coming out, Joel. Appreciate you doing this for me, man.
My pleasure. Pleasure to be here.
First things first, what got you into playing the trumpet? And I know you play trumpet and trombone, and I heard the story of where you actually you got a choice of playing trumpet or trombone, and they handed you a trombone, and you were like, okay, this is cool.
Yeah, I guess it was kind of like that. You know how much control you get in those situations, right? You gotta fill in the holes where they need them. But I think I was thinking about that this morning. I think I asked for a trumpet and I got a trombone. Is what happened.
Oh, okay.
So, because they go down the line in the classroom, they're like, "What do you want to play?" And so all my friends are like, "Trumpet, trumpet, trumpet," and they got to me. I'm like, "Trumpet." And then I didn't know the difference, so I just was like trombone. But my best friend was playing trombone, so I was like, okay, cool. I get to sit next to my best friend and play trombone. And
what grade was that?
That was fourth grade. We had a junior band program where I went to grade school. And then I had my friend who was playing cornet. I spent the night at his house one night, and I was like, hey, can I play that? And so I started messing around with it and found out intuitively you could pick up a little bit of the trumpet by knowing some of the trombone stuff.
Right.
So because they're very similar instruments in a lot of ways,
sure,
in terms of the overtone series and positions and stuff. So it was really easy. So I started playing both of them, and my band director from junior band or fourth grade band became my trumpet teacher over the summer. I left that school and went to a different school, a public school, that had an enormous band program, and but I wanted to still take private lessons, and so I ended up taking lessons with the director. Her name is Vicky Smolik, who she's like in St. Louis. She's one of the top trumpet players for shows and classical music, and really kind of showed me everything about playing brass. So I had her as a private teacher pretty much all the way through grade school and partially through high school. And
like 4 or 5 years?
Yeah, at least 4, 5, 6 years, somewhere like that. And she was teaching me primarily trombone, but I started playing more trumpet and learning, classical repertoire and playing. You have those contests when you're a kid. You try to play for a blue ribbon or whatever. And
right.
And so I started playing, classical literature on the trumpet and solo literature, and but I was always playing trombone in the band. So like my role all the way pretty much through college had always been trombone. And then when I moved out to the Bay Area, I was playing both, but then just started getting more calls for trumpet, and basically just started practicing trumpet primarily. Now it's all I practice. So I touch the trombone.
So I was thinking about that the other day. If how athletes have their cross trainers. So it's like, do you feel like when you play trombone, your chops get stronger because it's using different muscles or different part of your face? Or is that?
To be honest, I haven't worked out any benefit to playing trombone other than money. No, I don't know.
Hey, sorry, trombone players, man. This is really for trumpet players anyway. No,
I'm really with you, but not. No, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's some benefit to, and maybe if I practice more trombone, I would actually discover the benefit. But I don't.
So you don't think there's because I remember I used to work at Great America and we'd play 45 minutes or 40 minutes and we have 20 minutes off. Those were our breaks, and we did 6 sets a day.
Wow.
And one break, I played the guy's tuba, and I remember for 15 minutes I just played the tuba during the break. I was shot for the rest of the 5 sets.
Wow.
My chops were gone, but I had never played trombone or tuba, so it was like I didn't even think about it then. It's like, what if I played tuba? Would my trumpet playing being stronger? I don't know.
Yeah,
it was just one of those geeky things.
It's an interesting question because I know a lot of trumpet players that try to go down to a bigger, mouthpiece to play trombone or whatever, and they really have a tough time with it. Whereas starting as a trombone player and going to trumpet for some reason was easier.
Okay.
It was like warming up for the big event in a lot of ways.
Right.
But I hand it to those guys. I know a few people that play tuba or sousaphone and trumpet just because, you get into a second line band or, in the bandas, that's a thing. You play the trumpet.
These guys are heavy.
The guys that play sousaphone are always the best players in the band.
Right.
So
that crazy articulation too,
yeah,
man. It's like
insane.
It's off the hook.
So yeah, I don't know. But playing both is definitely, I mean, I think that it's enhanced my my melodic and linear kind of movement in a way as far as playing jazz goes, just because I can hear trombone lines on the trumpet and vice versa. So definitely playing trombone after playing trumpet, I definitely have more like bebop vocabulary, I think, on the trombone than I would have had otherwise. And it was a big reason why I wanted to play trumpet, as my main. Anyway, was because trombone's a hard instrument, and it's something that I feel like it has limitations that I want to go beyond, and I don't want to work too hard, so I try to do it easier with the valves.
Sure.
Valves are easy. You can play lines and stuff.
Right.
You can do that on the trombone. There's cats that do it. I just was too lazy to try to.
It's a different beast.
Oh no, and I'm not good with with failure and stuff like that. But even though I fail all the time, but anyway, yeah. So trumpet just felt better. As far as just being able to move around. And the agility that you have and the dexterity you have.
Right.
I'm partial to.
So did I get that right? You didn't start playing trumpet really until college?
Well, no,
or you played in high school too?
In high school, I just never played in an ensemble unless it was something I wanted to do on my own. I was always playing trombone in the school bands.
Gotcha.
When I got to college, I had my scholarship, and that was my job. Basically, was to play trombone. So I did play in some ensembles on trumpet, but those were all electives. So anything that was like a what's the word I'm looking for? Like a requirement. I would have to play trombone. So which is fine, I mean, I got to be in those ensembles, which was cool. Whatever got me in was good.
Right.
So
so you also so when you were taking lessons, you were taking mostly trombone lessons, right? The classical lessons. So I'm wondering, when you get to University of Miami and you're studying jazz, what kind of things did you do? What kind of things were you practicing? Were you that guy that was playing, heads in 12 keys? Were you playing licks in 12 keys? What kind of stuff were you doing that made your jazz playing better?
I was doing none of that.
Okay.
No, I mean, I think there were certain things that you have to learn your scales, and so they, I went with the curriculum. I went where I was guided with the curriculum, and so I practiced the scales, and then you had to practice piano, so I practiced 2-5-1s on the piano, and we learned how to apply melodic minor to different types of dominant chords and, minor, major, seven, and just you learn how to apply those things. And, it's just funny because in college they dump a bunch of information on you, and,
Right.
You're kind of under pressure to sift through all that and incorporate it.
Right.
And, if it doesn't happen for you right away, it's got to happen later on in life, which is kind of what happened to me. I was touring with a disco band throughout college, so I didn't take my studies as seriously as I would if I were there focused and, not partying and all that stuff that you do in college.
Right.
But so when I moved out here, that's when I really started to go back and run through this stuff and really figure it out. And I've kind of developed a system, I think, as far as what to work on when working on playing jazz. But the main thing is breaking everything down to its simplest form. So, there are certain things like, if you're a classical player, you study, your technique, and then you study etudes, and you practice scales, and you practice long tones, and different exercises that all, the culmination of bring you to this playing form where you're able to execute Petrushka, or you're able to play, the Nutcracker or Holst or whatever, and so I think that with jazz and improvisation and bebop, it's the same kind of thing. You work on scales, you work on arpeggios, patterns, you transcribe solos, and the combination of those things and the technique, you got to include the technique in there, but the combination of all that stuff makes you able to be ready for a bebop gig.
Right.
So, but as far as, I kind of forgot what you asked, but
just like, if you could break down, like you said, okay, like the arpeggios and the scales, I mean, and the licks and transcribing, of course, that's kind of like the meat and potatoes of learning jazz and the language, right? Learning how to swing or whatever. Could you break it down and be even more specific? Like, usually the last question I ask is, what's the thing that helped you the most? Like, for some people, it's like a mouthpiece, it's a horn, or studying with, this person, or listening to that, or maybe you were able to, I don't know, assimilate some sort of exercise or something that really lifted you off the ground jazz-wise. It's like, for me, it was like when the Mark Levine Jazz Theory book came out, I went, oh, I read through that and went, oh, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
This makes sense. Right? And started putting it together that way.
Yeah.
And things started to click theory-wise and jazz-wise after that, as far as applying the scales and the chords, scales to the chords and what the chords are and how to make the changes.
Yeah.
So I guess my question is, what exactly did you do to get where Joel is today?
Yeah, that's a long process.
I know it's not one thing,
I can think of a few things that are definitely important were important to me getting to that next place. The first thing I think would be, because when I first started improvising, I didn't know. I was just, you making up melody and that.
Just mess around, man.
I didn't really take it seriously. It was more for fun. And then I went to a band camp, like a classical band camp at Eastern Illinois University. I was there for a week, and at the end of the week, they asked me to stay for the jazz camp because they needed to fill some chairs, so they were going to give me a scholarship for that. And I went to this jazz camp for a week, and I started to really, I played in a big band. I had theory classes in the morning. It was a very focused and intense study of jazz. So, and there was one of the improv instructors, and he's a trumpet teacher from my hometown. His name's Tom Berkner, and he was teaching at University of Illinois at the time, and he taught me how to just play any kind of scale, whether it's minor, major, or whatever, but play it in diatonic thirds. And so I would go home and I would put on an Aebersold or something, just major or minor, the all keys.
Yeah.
And I would play diatonic thirds in the key centers of those particular studies, you
Right.
know. So you'd go through and there'd be a study in A flat major and you'd play diatonic thirds. And it got to the point where I could just play over that over and over like a drone in diatonic thirds, and I got the key in my head, and I was playing eighth notes at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So anything that gets you playing, it's almost like fake it till you make it in a lot of ways.
Right.
You get to be, you don't have to understand it necessarily, but it gets you playing. So
Before we go on, just for our listeners, can you give us an example of diatonic thirds?
I used to play, and all it is patterns, but they're diatonic, and they have some sort of not necessarily symmetry, but it's a repeating pattern.
Right.
Anyway, so that got me going. That was one thing. The other thing I think probably that took me to a point where I could actually feel like I'm really playing was moving away from college and Miami and coming out here and having, for the first time to really, bust my butt to get work. And so I had to practice and hustle and be on point, which didn't always happen.
Right.
So let's just say I had plenty of distractions. But,
So when you say, you're busting your butt, and then there's just like, I'm just trying to get into the thought process and the practice process of somebody who plays at your level. Because when I hear you play, there's a couple things. First of all, you play in time, and there's when you play a solo, there's a melody, but it's modern sounding, but there's also I'm not articulating this very well. There's a direction. You know what you're gonna play. It sounds like before you even play it. You're not scuffling.
Right.
Like when you play, it's like I'm playing this because the melody's in my head and I'm playing it.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? It's like how do you do that, Joel?
Well, I think you're kind of hitting on what I was about to say.
Okay.
Which is I mean, when I moved out here, I had to take gigs with whatever I could find
Sure.
work. So
Yeah.
I ended up working with a band at the Serenader in Oakland for like 3 years, playing R&B, 2 nights a week for like $36 a night plus tips.
So like covers and stuff, or,
Yeah,
or
covers,
like Motown stuff, or
It's Motown,
top 40
and
stuff.
it was stuff that you would turn on Kiss FM in here, and so playing with a band, and playing, with those time elements and have, playing hard, and you had to play convincing. Folks that came to those joints, they knew how the music was supposed to sound, and so if you didn't perform up to task, you would
You
hear
heard about
it. So there was that. I started working at Glide Church, and I was playing trombone there, and Dave Scott was playing trumpet, so I got to hear a great trumpet player every Sunday, which was cool.
Yeah.
I played in the Pearls band,
Right.
and again next to Dave Scott, Mike Olmos was there, so there was a lot of people that you had to kind of keep up with, but I think that the thing I picked up from all that, mostly the church gig and the R&B gig, and playing with folks like LaVey Smith and what is it, the importance of time over everything else. Time is like that universal constant, not just in life, but in music too. I think time is probably the most important element. So if you have a strong internal clock, you can feel the pulse, then you can place your notes wherever you want, but it's the stronger you feel the beat and the meter, the easier it is for you to say what you want to say.
Sure.
So for me, that sense of time was something that wasn't really stressed in college. College for me was a focus on two things. It was the harmony and the scales, and then it was also the sight reading. And then not that time wasn't focused on at all, but it just wasn't. To me, it didn't seem like it was like something that they prioritized, and they probably felt like you were going to get that no matter what. Whereas maybe some some cats don't. I
Mhm.
don't know.
Yeah.
Because there's plenty of great players that play with horrible time. You know.
Which seems to be the most, like for my students, is the most difficult thing to teach. It's like,
yeah.
no, the pulse is here. The metronome, they hear click, 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 and still they're playing out of time. And I'm like, well, no, you need to not distract yourself, but you need to separate what you're doing. You got to hear one ear is towards you and the other one's towards a click. So you got to have a spatial sense of time and then play in time.
Yeah.
And sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't happen.
Yeah, I feel like it's a like a bodily thing. I feel like you have to actually have it somewhere in your system,
Yeah.
you know, and you have to. I mean, that's for me. When I was playing at Glide, I would watch the drummer. Drummer's San Jose native. I don't know if he's native, but he lives down here. His name's Ronnie Beck,
Mm-hmm.
and Ronnie, if you're familiar with him, when he plays, you can see like he nods his head, and he kind of, you know, you can always see him showing some sign of not just the pulse, but even subdivisions and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So when I started watching him and kind of picking that up in other musicians, I started to do that, and I was like, okay, so that's what it means to feel the time that deeply. Is just it's in your body, it's in your system. So, but then like you watch a video of Trainer Bird, and there's none of that. You know, they're just like completely statuesque, and the only movement besides their fingers is their eyes blinking. So you don't necessarily have to like sit there and groove the whole time. But for me, that works. But I think still you carry it inside somewhere where it's so concrete that it would be like a major travesty to like falter from the time. You know?
Right.
It's like it's so ingrained.
Right. I think what happens too with the younger jazz players is, you know, they're trying to do so many things at one time. It's like, okay, I have this chord. I know I can play the scale. Oh, but now I have to come up with a melody. But now this melody has to be in time. So there's this lag. I mean, they're coming up, and you can hear the process going on, but it's not in time.
Yeah.
So I think it's, maybe you'll agree, it's just a matter of doing it a lot, and over time, the two become one.
I suppose. I mean, I would personally try to put myself into positions where I was forced to. I mean, that means playing with other people's playing. One of the things I encounter with my students, I've been teaching at Cal State East Bay for a while. Is that they don't get out and play with other musicians.
Right.
You know,
right.
They don't set up their own sessions.
Right.
They're not trying to be out there gigging. I mean, we were in college and out there gigging.
Yeah.
You know? So they don't, for whatever reason, they don't have those same opportunities. Maybe because the work's dried up for one, you know, and the other is, you know, I don't know, maybe college is that much harder. You know, I don't know. I don't know how it is now, but yeah, I think just getting out and playing and putting yourself in situations where you have to play on somebody else's clock, or you have to fit in one way or another. The other is, you know, playing along with recordings, not just Abersolds, not just with the metronome, but all those things combined.
Right.
But I mean, I would think the goal is to get to a point where you're not really thinking about it. You're just you're in it.
Sure.
You're in it.
Yeah.
You know, it's like if you were in a drum circle and you know, sat on this rhythm for a while, you know, you'd finally absorb it, and you wouldn't think about it. You'd just be thinking about, you know, whatever.
Right.
Know?
Right.
You know?
Yeah, because it seems like once you start thinking about it, you're done.
Yeah. Right.
It's too late.
Yeah, it should
You're
just
out
be
of there.
natural. And I mean, I think rhythm and time is, I mean, that's a basic human thing, almost the same as, you know, breathing or blinking or anything like that. We all have it in us.
Right.
You know, we all have music in us, and time is part of music. So I think
Right.
it's there. It's just a matter of tapping into it.
Yeah.
You know.
Let's talk about who are some of your favorite players are and why.
Okay.
I know
Yeah.
you're a Miles guy, like most of us.
Yeah, I think
Yeah?
if you're a jazz musician and really just a musician in general, and you don't like Miles, there's something wrong. You know, because I mean, I think there's certain elements of him that are definitely like I would prefer somebody else over this, but as a musician as a whole, he's up there with my top 5.
Right.
You know, maybe
Right.
top 2.
I remember my in high school getting into Miles and going, yeah, people are talking about this Miles guy. He's a jazz guy. And the first so I go to Tower Records, which was a record store which they don't have anymore.
One of those.
And I went to the Miles Davis section. I pulled out Jack Johnson.
Oh.
And I put it on. I was like, what is this? Is this jazz? What's this like? It's like rock. It's like Jimi Hendrix. And I was like totally confused. Like, where's the swing, man? And I was like, maybe I don't like Miles.
Yeah.
And I didn't really know anything about Miles. And then I figured out, okay, this is his jazz rock fusion period. I was like, oh. And then you go back and you go, okay, well, this is the jazz I was looking for.
Yeah.
And then he gets into the hip hop thing, and he did the Marcus Miller thing, the tutu and all that, which I love, all that stuff now. But Miles was it was a trip because I didn't realize he had periods.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Too many of them.
Whereas like Louis Armstrong, you're pretty much going to get Louis Armstrong in the New Orleans sound.
Yeah.
And swing. You
Yeah.
know?
Miles changed music like 5 or 6 times.
Right.
Changed jazz.
Right.
It's a trip to think about how, he did some kind of project or had some band, and then all of a sudden everybody else is trying to do that.
Right.
He
was
really,
the first.
He's a pioneer in a lot of ways.
He's like at the forefront of every, new genre that comes up. He's at the front, cool, and then modal, and then jazz rock fusion, even hip hop and jazz and all that stuff. Yeah.
But I hear what you're saying about, Jack Johnson. Not necessarily that, but just the concept of, because like when I first heard Charlie Parker, I was like, that's too crazy.
It's too crazy, I know.
And then, you got into it and you understand it a little more, and then all of a sudden it makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's like your brain only allows you to comprehend so much, at the time.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you expand and find different things that lead you back to that or something like that. And,
sure.
But, Miles is definitely one. Freddie Hubbard is a huge influence. I was listening to Freddie when I was, in grade school and digging on. I mean, for me, he was a transformative player.
Sure.
Those two guys really kind of brought me through college in a lot of ways. But I checked out other cats, Clifford Brown, of course,
sure,
and Lee Morgan, and I listened to some of the younger guys at my time when I was in high school. So that would have been like Roy Hargrove and Wallace Roney, Winton, of course. So I mean, all the cats that I listened to as trumpet players. I listened to a lot of trombone players because I was
sure.
So I checked out JJ and Curtis Fuller, and then cats because I was a trombone player. So I'd check out Bill Watrous and
sure.
and Carl Fontana, and I mean, I can name off a bunch of people, but to answer your question, I think Miles and Freddie were really the cats.
So what is it about Freddie Hubbard that you're really attracted to?
I don't know. Freddie is like the perfect combination of strength on the trumpet. I mean, he's such a beast.
Articulation,
sense
of swing and time.
Yeah, and then just doing things that are impossible. Like the stuff that he does, the acrobatics are crazy and impossible. I don't know too many cats that can do like nowadays. There are great trumpet players that can't do what he did.
I know.
And just taking the trumpet and turning it into an instrument where I've never heard that on that instrument before, but and then the other musical things, his melody is the hipness of the lines he plays, his ability to move in and out of the changes but most of all just his power. I mean, I can say the same thing for Clifford Brown. Clifford Brown's a beast.
Amazing.
If I was gonna recommend one trumpet player for somebody that wants to learn how to play bebop, he would be the guy.
Right.
He has all the vocabulary that you would ever need.
Right.
Right. To play bebop.
Right. Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah.
I remember talking about, playing things that are totally difficult. You can't believe it's being played on a trumpet. In high school, I got a transcription book of all Dizzy's solos. And I opened it up, and there's a lot of 16th notes, and it's really high, and they're really long. And I looked at it, and I just closed it. And I was like, there's no way I'm going to be able to play. I'm not going to be able to play this, man.
Yeah.
And so it was a long time before I could even come back.
Yeah.
Because I just listened to it and I go, man, how does he do that?
Right.
And it's inspiring, but also, how you get, it's like, I can't do that. How do you do that?
Yeah,
And then
it's
you
daunting.
It's daunting,
Yeah.
totally.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I'm working on a Freddie Hubbard lick off of one of his tunes. And it's just a lick, but it's a super fast lick. It's one of his little runs, but just something
Yeah.
impossible.
Right.
And so I have this program called Transcribe that I use, and I can section off this lick, and I
Right.
can slow it down to like 30%,
Right.
and still, figure out what he's playing, and then try to work it in, at a faster tempo. And it's,
Right.
but I can spend 2 hours on that and not get very far, and then have I'll put it aside and won't come back to it for months.
Right.
Because I know that, that's the limits of my technique right now. So until I figure something else out that enables me to move faster or play faster,
Right.
I'm not going to be able to get any further on that lick.
So you set it in Transcribe, and then you have it loop, and then you maybe bump it up a few beats per minute every time. So it's almost like what we're doing is applying like a classical sense of practicing to jazz, right? You just take like if you're playing the Hummel trumpet concerto, you start it slow and right.
Well, I think to gain any ground, no matter what you do, you have to break it down into its simplest form, almost like an atom.
Yeah.
Molecules break down into atoms, break down into protons, electrons, and and subatomic particles, and all that stuff. Well, it's the same with with tunes. You break a tune, no matter how hard it is, you can break it down into its simplest form, and you can work on voice leading between two changes,
right,
by setting a loop and then just playing over that ad nauseum,
at a slower tempo,
or speeding it up, however you got to learn it, but you just break it down into, sections or loops, or just like if I was transcribing in solo, I'd do the same thing. I'd break it down into 8 bars, 4 bars, 2 bars, or whatever I needed to, and then you reassemble it, you speed it up, and then it's like you've put together this nice IKEA trumpet solo, and it's there it is, and it'll stand the test of time.
So when you transcribe it, so I assume you're not writing it down, you're just doing it by ear, or you're just playing.
I'll write it down if it's something I want to give to somebody,
right,
or but I can play through a lick and think about what notes I'm playing and the chord that I'm playing over, and figure out, oh yeah, that's what that is. That's how he's doing that. That's how he's outlining that chord. Oh, that was slick how he went, up a half step and then landed here. I can figure that stuff out. To me, there are several gains for transcribing just by learning a solo. One is internalizing the solo itself. You're internalizing all those licks. If you really get into the solo and you play, like you try to match the sound and articulation and the inflections, then you're gaining all that.
Right. The language.
Yeah. You're internalizing everything. So vocabulary, harmony, sound, articulation. And then the most obvious benefit is you have the horn on your face the whole time.
Right.
So if I'm never stronger than when I'm transcribing.
Yeah.
Never.
Yeah.
Because when I'm transcribing, I'm playing, you lose track of time. You playing over a loop, try to get it, and you're just playing and playing and playing and playing. And you realize, 10, 15 minutes, I haven't taken the horn off my face. And
you wonder why your chops are so swollen. It's
right.
like, what happened?
Exactly.
Oh, I've been playing 15 minutes straight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember I did a Clifford Brown solo on I can't remember the name of the song. It'll pop in my head. Yeah. Anyway, After You've Gone. 6 choruses, of Clifford.
Right.
Playing pretty. I don't think I ever got it completely up to speed, but there's no etude that would give me that amount of technique.
No.
In the world.
Yeah.
So, that's a great study.
And you're doing it by ear, and you're internalizing it, and trying to play it in time, and with the same inflections and articulations and sound and vibrato, and trying to sound like one person.
Yeah, if you want to talk about a transformative moment in my education, that would have been one too. School of Clifford Brown, because all of a sudden I'm playing his vocabulary, his ideas, and so all of a sudden I had new bebop concepts and new strength in my chops. So
I remember playing a Clifford Brown solo, and then he would do this thing where he'd play 2 courses, 3 courses, and then he'd go up into the upper register and he'd have a strong G or something. I'm like, I'm shot. It's like, what am I going to do? How do you do that?
Yeah.
And then, like, just before this interview, we were talking about, chops and whatnot. It's like, you just got to figure it out.
Yeah.
Because nobody can go, you got to put your lips right there. And then, it's just like, everybody's different.
Everybody's different.
Yeah.
And my embouchure has changed.
Yeah.
In the last 10 years, I think they always change. I think it's never. I'm no expert, so I mean, for some people maybe it's like it has to be the same, but I think your mouth changes.
Teeth change, everything. Yeah. So we were talking about how your chops. You feel like your chops have changed. I mean, did you ever go through an embouchure change, or even backing up, who did you just find an embouchure that worked for you, or did somebody say, say M, put the mouthpiece on your face and go? I mean, you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. Most of my embouchure, my focus on embouchure was done on trombone. So I had two trombone teachers when I was at Miami. One was Dr. Charles Campbell, and he was more. He pushed me more about sound production and air and stuff like that, because when you're playing jazz, you always want to back off and try to play real light. And he was like, "Damn it, man! Just put some air through the horn."
Right.
And Dante Luciani was my jazz teacher. And his focus was on, first of all, long tones and just making sure that your sound was nice and round and open. And then about keeping your corners tight. And so as long as those two things were there, the air and the corners, then everything was good. And he would always be able to pinpoint the time when I let my corners drop or something like that. He was really good about that. So the more I focused on that, the better my embouchure was in general. I never had to really worry about placement on trombone. It was always where it needed to be. And I think some of that just has to do with where your teeth are. Like I have a tooth that kind of sticks out here. And so, I would kind of anchor my mouthpiece somewhere where in relation to that, I'm not sure. It wasn't really centered. It may have been offset a little bit. When I was playing trumpet, though, for whatever reason, I started playing off to the side, and everybody would say, "Man, your embouchure is so funny. How are you getting?" Because it was weird. It was like off here,
like that far off.
Yeah. And I don't know what happened, but just somehow it just started to get more. It just moved, and I didn't think about it. I didn't do it. It just kind of happened naturally. So I don't know if that was maybe just because I was practicing more trumpet and doing more studies and just started setting up the right way.
It wasn't conscious, like I'm going to set more in the middle. It just floated.
It just floated there.
Huh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I feel like my embouchure's in a good place, but if I took a lesson with Jay Rossetto or somebody, they might set me straight, So I it's something I've been meaning to do, because it's like you always find limitations in your playing, and you wonder if there's some adjustment you need to make.
Is there a better way?
Yeah,
there's got to be a better way.
Should I switch mouthpieces again?
Is there a better mouthpiece?
Should I get
Maybe it's my
trumpet?
horn. Yeah.
Let me try 16 different trumpets and then come back to the one I was originally playing. So.
Yeah, and go, oh no, it's just me.
Yeah.
I keep practicing. Yeah, and I noticed too, you're like, a lot of trumpet players have the shredded chops. Like your chops aren't all shredded looking,
Yeah.
Like people have like shrapnel hanging and some divots and stuff.
Oh yeah, you mean just when they haven't played for 2 days?
No,
and there's still like a mark there or something.
No,
like that?
just like they're shredded.
Yeah,
like a lot of lead players.
Oh yeah,
you see some guys. Like Lewis's chops aren't. Louis Fasman, he doesn't have shredded chops. Engelbright doesn't, but some other people do. You look at their faces like, that guy's a trumpet player, because there's like a cut and a bunch of shrapnel hanging out. Like I just heard this story that Louis Armstrong, he was back in the dressing room and he was peeling, like he had a tweezers and he was peeling his lip like that. He goes, and then somebody's interviewing and asked him, "What are you doing, man?" It's like, I gotta take off all this skin because it clogs my mouthpiece. And he would take months off because he would crack his lip
from
playing so hard. And you look at his lip and you go, okay, yeah. Or Miles' lip. you
Yeah.
know, and I think Clifford. Anyway, it's just
Yeah.
you're just looking. Well, man, those lips are shredded.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've been playing hard.
Yeah, I guess that's a lot of pressure
Yeah.
if you pull the horn. I do that every now and then,
Correct.
especially if
Yeah.
I'm playing, you know, like a pop gig or somewhere I'm playing more
loud
high
and
notes.
high or
Yeah.
something. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I think my injuries come in other places like hernias.
Oh,
and
yeah. Don't get me
headaches
started with
and
hernias, man.
stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't think I play with too much pressure, but I definitely there are times when I know I cut off the circulation, and it'll mess with your endurance for the night. Stuff like
yeah.
that. You have to,
Or the next 3 days.
right. Yeah,
As you get
all
older.
the above. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Did you ever do like Caruso exercises? You know, where you keep the horn on your face and do it until failure. And did you ever do any of that stuff?
No. I have that Caruso book, and I played through it, and I not to say I shouldn't go back to it. I think at some point I'll check in and see if there's any way that I can find some benefit out of playing it.
Mm-hmm.
But I always kind of lean towards like the Clark book, because I wanted to get into the dexterity.
Sure.
And I played a lot of the colon exercises that kind of got
That's
me
good
up
stuff.
into the upper register
Yeah.
solidly,
Yeah.
So like, and once I started doing those colon exercises, things kind of shored up for me in the upper register for sure. Like I started to be very, very consistent with my air and sound in those for the high C's and D's and things like that.
Yeah.
So as soon as I started playing those exercises, it opened that whole register up for me.
So were they the expanding range exercises in
Yep.
particular, where they're basically lip slurs, right?
Yeah.
And then they have the other one, which is lip trills, and they have another one, which is intervals.
Yeah.
So if you do like those three, those are just killer.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
and they
doing
hurt
those
your
now,
chops.
and
Yeah.
they hurt your chops.
Yeah.
And they hurt me mentally too, because it's like, wow, why can't I do this?
Well, yeah, it is. It's you have to concentrate to get them out right. And I used to do them really slow.
Yeah.
I'd do them super slow so that I would do them with a tuner when I was doing them slow, so that I made sure that when I would make that transition, that it would be as close to in tune as possible, and then I would work on speeding it up. But I always, when I first started a new study, I would play with a tuner so that I because you figure you got to pivot from every note that you play.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're off on the next note that you play, then the note after that is going to be off, and subsequently everything that follows. So the goal is to play every note perfectly. Then you have to make sure that you're doing that. So
Right.
Yeah.
So bust out the tuner and the
Yeah.
metronome and make sure you're being
all
accurate
those tools
and
are important.
good tone.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then it's like work.
yeah.
It's like you're not just messing around anymore.
know,
you're like really trying to accomplish something.
I guess the goal would be to find a way to enjoy that work part of it, like to dig into the challenge. And some days you're in the mood for it, and some days you just want to put on a tune and play along with it or something.
Right.
Like.
Right.
So and that's the thing, is kind of reading where you're at, I guess. So
People talk about motivation, and I'm like, motivation only lasts so long. It's so like, what do you do to get motivated to play? In those days where you're like, man, I don't want to play today. You put on a tune and just play along, or you listen to somebody, or.
I think that's my fallback. Probably is if I don't feel like I don't want to get into this thing I have to work on,
Right.
I'll put on a tune and just try to have fun.
Yeah.
And then 9 out of 10 times, like I'll be playing that tune and I'll be like, well, I'm not hitting that turnaround right.
Right.
So let me turn this off, and I'll go to the piano and I'll work that out. And then maybe I'll put the tune in to transcribe, and I'll section off that. I'll find different ways to.
So now you're practicing.
I'm basically, I'm tricking myself into
that's
working
good.
on something,
That's
or
good.
on a technical, tip. Like if I'm playing a melody or if I'm playing a solo and something's not working out, I'll stop and how can I work this out? What do I need to do to facilitate me playing this lick that I just made up? Not that I'm ever going to use it again.
Sure.
But it's like the more technique you have. I mean, look at Wynton. He's got insane technique. He can play anything he wants.
Right.
So it's like, what do I need to work on to facilitate executing those kind of things?
Right.
So that's what I do. I kind of trick myself into playing. The other thing I do is like if I feel like I'm in a stale rut, I'll listen to a bunch of music.
Mm-hmm.
you know, whether it be classical or pop or whatever. I'll just like try to listen to as much music as I can, and then I go back to listening to trumpet players because that's the easiest thing to draw you into the horn.
Sure.
So I'll listen to whatever and find some sort of motivation there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll do that too. It's like maybe I'm not into practicing that, or I'm tired or whatever, and I'll listen or I'll watch a video, you know, on YouTube, and I'll go, "Whoa, that guy's really good.
Yeah.
That's really amazing. Why
Yeah.
am I taking a break right now? I got so much work to do."
Right.
So I'll get inspired that way sometimes.
Yeah. And
too.
and you know, let's not leave out live shows and stuff like that too.
Yeah,
You go hear
yeah.
somebody live, and you know, it doesn't even have to be your instrument. Just go hear some live music, and it kind of gets you pumped and like, oh yeah, this is my job. This is
Yeah,
what I do. I
right,
do
yeah.
what they're doing.
Right.
You know,
Right.
so it's time for me to step up.
Yeah.
You know, that
Yeah.
kind of thing. And that's the thing. It's always a challenge to get on stage and step up to the moment.
Mhm.
And if you don't see that and practice that part of things, then all the practice that you do in your shed isn't going to amount to anything. You know?
Nothing.
So you have to get out there and see shows, and you have to get out there and be a part of shows
And play with real live human.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It has to be that way. Otherwise, what's the point? you
Right.
know?
Yeah.
You know.
I do.
Yeah.
So, talking about being on stage, now you recently had been the musical director with, is it Philip Phillips?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, talk, you know, that's a pretty big time gig. So, tell me about that experience and how you got the gig and what that was like.
The Philip Phillips thing came out of nowhere, actually. I was at home on a Saturday with my wife, and I just got this text from Errol Cooney, who was a local guitar player.
Mm-hmm.
He's from Houston, but he lived in the Bay for a while, and he was Phillips ND, and he had asked a friend, you know, I need a trumpet player for 2 months for this run, and the friend referred me, and that's how I got the gig. And it's a matter of, you know, all those gigs usually are just referrals, you know, so
Right.
it's like who you know, and
Right.
and are you capable of being on the road,
Right.
you know, are you capable of hanging with people on a bus 24/7
24/7.
and you know, doing your job on stage as well, which I guess I was. I don't know, maybe sometimes.
Yeah.
But that's how I got into that scene, and it was great. You know, I listened to the music. I got the music like maybe, you know, like a month or so in advance, and I took my time learning all the tunes. You memorize everything that you're doing. You don't go in with any kind of music.
No stands,
Yeah,
no sheet music.
No, I mean, nowadays, you know, it's cool to have like an iPad or something if you want to
Right.
sketch some notes or something.
Right.
But eventually, you end up getting rid of all that stuff 'cause you
Right.
don't need it. You got the show in your head,
Right.
you know. But yeah, we had like a week of rehearsals, and the band was killing. It was Jason Thomas on drums, and it was J.J. Smith on bass, and Bobby Sparks on keys. This cellist Dave Egar on cello,
Right.
amazing cello player, and Errol was playing guitar.
Did you play some keys on the gig?
I did this last part of the run that I did,
Right.
just because we didn't really have a dedicated keyboard player. We had Dave Egar was playing cello, and he was trying to cover as many keyboard. He's like a concert pianist, so he's more than capable of handling anything. But there were times when he wanted to play cello,
Right.
so I would cover keyboard parts.
Okay.
Or there were just things where he would want to play string parts or organ parts, and I would cover like a Rhodes part or a piano
Okay.
part. And my piano chops they're not show quality at all. I'm just basically holding down like, you know, either pads or playing like a part that never moves or never changes.
But you have enough chops, you know, enough theory to know, okay, these chords, and I can play in time. And,
yeah,
you know, you
if
got
I
your
can work
basic
at it
chops.
and practice
Yeah.
with it, I can
Sure.
I can play that. I do that on Sheely's show too. I play
Right.
like a lot of utility. That's kind of what I've become in that scene, is like a utility kind of guy that covers.
Seems trumpet players do that a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's well, you know, in an age where there's not a lot of gigs for horn sections
Right.
anymore, you know, you want to make sure that you have some bases covered otherwise.
Yes.
And it's not, I mean, it's good to learn that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
I just want to get better at it if I can. So So I could play maybe just keys on a gig sometime. I've always wanted to do that. I've just never practiced piano hard enough.
It's kind of fun too. I mean, play little keys, little trumpet, maybe doing some background vocals. It's it's kind of it's kind of fun.
That part of it too. I did sing some background.
Yeah,
I was proud of that. I took a vocal lesson and everything. I'm sure I sounded horrible. I'm sure I don't want to
good
go
enough
back
to
and
get
hear
the
those
gig.
tracks.
Yeah.
But yeah, at that time the band was great, and it was a jam band, and it was so there would be a lot. I was the only horn player, so there was a lot of space for me to improvise,
which is cool.
And it wasn't just like simple rock stuff. It was like pretty cool cycles and things like that, and the band was great, so we would all push each other in those moments. So it was a real supportive environment, and the band was incredible. It was one of the best bands I've ever played with.
So you were the Chris Body of Philip Phillips.
Yeah, in a lot of ways.
I always thought that was such a cool gig. He's kind of the first, well, not the first, but only a trumpet player playing with the a huge pop star.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
and I'm like, so what? I can just noodle around like Branford Marsalis did, and it's like, that's cool.
That's very cool
and fun.
Yeah,
but you're still an integral part of the artistic endeavor.
Yeah, and definitely validated too. I mean, he's got his own career now where he's touring constantly.
Right.
He's kicking butt. I heard him when he was in San Francisco at SF Jazz. I have a friend, Cy Smith, that sings with him, and yeah, his show is great. He has an amazing band, and he's playing his music.
Right.
And sounds perfect.
Yes.
It's a beautiful show.
It's clean.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So he's definitely worthy of everything that he got, and I mean, I can't think of a bigger guy to play with, as far as, I guess there are other cats, I don't know, but I mean,
that's still a big gig. I mean, you're on the road, you're touring.
Yeah.
And tell us a little bit something about being on the road, how it's not all glamour. It's
no.
it's a lot of traveling and a lot of humping your own stuff sometimes and carrying your own stuff, and or even if you don't, you're still it's exhausting. Just going from point A to point B.
I'm trying to think of the least glamorous thing about.
There's a lot of them.
There's a lot. Yeah, I think maybe when you're on the bus and you're about 2 hours away from where you need to go. Like you get, because you bus at night and you get to your place, at 2 a.m. or whatever, and your bus sits there.
Or later.
Yeah. If you can't go to the bathroom on the bus.
Right.
You can't number 2 on the bus. Anyway.
No,
but if you have to, you have to find a way. So that's probably the least glamorous thing, is like finding a solution to defecating on the bus that won't offend anybody.
That's right.
So, but no, I mean, there's trials like any kind of touring gig. The tour I'm on now, it's not really a tour. It's more like a lot of weekend and one-offs and stuff like that. We fly everywhere.
Are you talking about Sheila E?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
And so that's nice. There are perks to flying. You get to come home a lot.
You're not gone.
You're
all
not
the
gone
time.
continuously. Yeah. But as I do, that airports can be exhausting.
Right.
That part of travel where you're waiting, your flight gets delayed, you're sitting on a plane. The up and down takes a toll on your organs and everything. So there's there's pluses and minuses to different types of touring. But I right now I kind of enjoy being able to be at home for a certain amount of time and staying connected with the local musicians too.
Yeah.
Like, in the local scene. And because I think when people hear you're on a tour, they just assume you're always on tour.
Right.
And then you stop getting those calls. And then you get home and you don't really care about it, when you should. You should be like on the phone hustling.
Right.
It's like you get into your little rut and you think, I'm good.
I got to the point where I didn't tell anybody I was leaving.
Yeah.
I'd just go and I'd keep my book with me. So I'd have my phone and people call and I'll just say, oh yeah, I can do that gig. I just wouldn't tell anybody, which I don't know, probably not the best thing to do, but I didn't want anybody to know I was gone.
Yeah.
Cause I'd be home for 6 months and they go, I thought you were still gone. It's like, I know, maybe I've been home for a year or 6 months or whatever. So I know that can be an issue.
Yeah.
What would you recommend doing or practicing for somebody who's just getting into jazz? Like what maybe some things that you do with your students, or is it somebody just wants to get into it? Do you have any tips?
Well, yeah, if you're, we'll zero in on trumpet player, right?
Yeah. Okay.
So if I'm teaching a kid who's like, okay, I've been playing school music and marching band and all this for long enough, I want to really learn how to play some jazz. The first thing I do is make sure that they have stuff to listen to, because without that, you have no reference,
Right.
you know. So it's really important to. I mean, when I was at that point in my learning, I was fortunate. There was a trombone player. There's a Air Force base close to where I used to live, Scott Air Force Base outside of Belleville, and there was a trombone player named Scott Crump. And we would play together in like a college big band, because I was playing with like the community college big band, just so I'd have some other outlets other than school. And so he would play in that band, and then we'd play in the section together, and he was an amazing trombone player, and so he had all these albums of different things, so he'd make me mix cassettes of different musicians, trombone players, and so that got me listening to so-and-so, and then I would branch out from there. I was studying with a trombone player named Brett Stamps at SIUE, Southern Illinois University in Edwardsville, and he hit me to Wayne Shorter and other people that weren't trombone players. So you have to have a way to branch out and hear the language and the vocabulary and what everybody's saying and how they're doing it. You start to formulate in your head, oh, how does that happen? You ask questions. How are they doing this? How does this sound? How? You know, all of that. You know, if you're interested in it, if you listen to all that music and you're not really, you go back to like listening to, you know, the Rolling Stones or the Cure. Not that those are, you know, but that's what kids were listening to, you know, at the time when I was in high school. I was listening to Charlie Parker,
Right.
and Herbie Hancock,
Right.
you know, and I didn't really or listen to Nirvana or, you know, Metallica or whatever. I just didn't. I just wanted to listen to jazz. So it takes a special person to get into that stuff and want to listen to it, for one. So if they're into that, then I think it's good to move on and say, okay, well, then you need to work on these scales. You need to work on blues scales. You need to check out bebop scale. You need to check out all your major scales. You need to learn how Dorian minor, which is the modes, you know, you work on all your modes. You don't have to work on all of them. You just work on the ones that I mean, it's good for them to understand modes, but it's more important that they work on the ones that they're going to be able to apply.
Right.
So, and then, you know, melodic minor. I saw that thing you did with scales, and all those scales that you talked about, diminished and whole tone. You know, bebop is a really important scale, I think, and the blues scale is really important. It's something that we kind of take for granted, I think. It is, you know, just incorporating, you know, the bluesier elements into your playing somehow. You know, I mean, it's not I don't think it's a rule, but I think it's something that we should all be, you know, considering.
Yeah,
we're
definitely.
playing. I mean, it's this music comes from the blues, so
Right.
it's like
Yeah.
you don't want to leave that part of the roots of the music out.
Right.
So I think it's really important that. And, you know, and then when it comes down to playing with cats, if you have all this other stuff and you don't have the blues in your playing, they might not want to play with you, because you're kind of boxing yourself into this kind of being this kind of player. Oh, he plays everything but the blues, you know.
Right.
That's not going to work.
Right.
You know, that
So
kind
you're
of
lacking in a little bit of foundation.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Exactly. You want to
Yeah.
be as well-rounded as possible. So, but I'm kind of getting off that. I mean, as far as just the listening thing is so important. And then the second thing is the scales, learning to play melodies, and transcription, learning how to transcribe.
So listening first,
Yeah.
and then getting into the theory of it, and then
Yeah.
definitely transcribing.
Yeah.
And that seems to be like the daunting task of younger students who are like, I got to pick these notes out of the air.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, now there's never been a better time
Really?
to transcribe with all these apps and stuff. You can slow stuff down. Now, are you a purist who says, no, man, don't slow it down? You know, do it like they did when, you know, Lester Young did it or something.
Yeah, I think there's times when I try to force myself to do it, but then it's like, you know, why am I abusing myself?
Why am I
by
not
trying-
using? Yeah.
You know, here it is. There's an easier way to do it, and
Right.
you're gonna get it. To me, it's like if you can't get it slow, you're not gonna get it fast. You know,
Right.
And a lot of things, especially if it's a real technical part of the solo,
Right.
you know, it's better to learn it slow
Mm-hmm.
and then speed it up. If
Get
you
it
learn
under your fingers.
Yeah, if you learn it slow, the time and the articulation, the air, all the mechanics involved are going to be better at the faster tempo. It's not going to be worse. So it's
Right.
like, you know, it
Right.
makes sense to slow things down. And it is, I mean, we're in a great period technologically where we have so many tools in our belt that we can use, you know. The iReal B allows you to isolate 2 chords at a time, so you can work on your voice leading in
Right.
small increments and then expand them.
Right.
You know, transcribe. You can learn solos that would be otherwise impossible to learn.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, so yeah, I'm not really a purist when it comes to that. I think, you know, just learn it however
Whatever works for
know,
you.
and it'll get easier and faster as you
Right.
go. You know, you
Right.
become faster as your ear becomes more attuned to picking things up. You start learning the language, and so that's that lick that Charlie Parker played is, you know, in a Joe Henderson solo or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that would actually happen, but
You
I'm
start to
just saying,
connect the dots a little
yeah,
easier, right?
Yeah, you start to hear those licks,
Yeah.
and you start to hear, you know, how they outline harmonies and how they maneuver from this change to this change, and yeah, it's all about learning a language. Literally, it's a language.
Right.
You know, we communicate through our instruments using the licks that our ancestors played. You know,
Right.
and so it's, you know, it's really about that. And that's the thing for young kids is you don't want to miss out on that. If you jump straight into the younger generation of musicians, if you do that without going back and learning the language, then you're not going to have any of that foundation.
Right.
And maybe you don't want that. You know,
Right.
maybe you want to be completely modern and not play anything that has any kind of historical reference or whatever.
Yeah.
But, you know, you are boxing yourself into a certain type
Mm-hmm.
of jazz even. You know, whereas, you know, if you have all that, then you branch out from there.
Yeah.
You know.
Seems like now a lot of kids start at bebop,
Yeah.
and then they don't even go like swing, forget it. And then Louis Armstrong is like, well, who?
Yeah.
I mean, they know him, but that music is just so old, which is the reaction I had in high school. Was like, Dixieland, what is, not into it. And then the older I got, is like, amazing. Louis, what do you say?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I know. It's funny. The swing has kind of been filtered down
Yeah.
through the generations. So
Yeah.
the hardest swinging bands were those cats, you know, Louis and
Yeah.
Ellington and Basie and you know, all that stuff was swinging so hard. You know, you couldn't apply that swing to today's standards
Right.
without it sounding a little strange.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I shouldn't comment on the progression of the music, I suppose, because it's not, you know.
What do you mean?
Like as far as like what, if I approve or disapprove of the direction or anything like that, I don't think there's an approve or disapprove kind of thing. I think it's just, you know, you do your thing and you do the way you want.
Oh, I see. Yeah. What do you?
Yeah.
Do what you need to do.
Yeah,
or,
and
like,
we have to we always have to remind ourselves of that, you know,
Yeah.
not to let other people get into your head.
yeah.
And
Which can happen.
Oh, all the time. Like, it's really a tragedy, you know. It's
Yeah.
like, you know, you always consider. I mean, I think the thing to do is just to try to make that connection with whatever. I mean, I think there's points when I'm playing where I'm completely locked in to what I'm doing, and then there are times when I'm letting things from the outside distract me.
Mm-hmm.
So, but those moments when I'm locked in, it's I'm on another planet.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
And it feels great. And then you think about it, and you know, and you're like, how did I just play that? And then all of a sudden you're out.
Right.
And you know, it's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
you gotta stay. There's so many things that can pull you out. It's almost like being in like a warp speed tube or something like that, where if you want to keep playing the right stuff, you got to stay in that tube, because this last
don't get
little thing
distracted.
will take you out, and you got to jump back in again, you know.
Right.
So
right.
that's a challenge.
Yeah, definitely. So let's wrap it up here, and let's where can people find Joel Behrman? I know you have a website. I know you have an album out that you've done.
I do. I have an album that's I think it's on. You can definitely find it on iTunes and Spotify and all that stuff. I recorded it a long time ago, like 7-8 years ago or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's called Stepping Back. I have a website that I don't ever check, and I don't update. So I'm kind of
You're off the grid. You're going off the grid.
I'm pretty much off the grid and just working cat in this area. But
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you go to my website, you can email. I'll if there's anybody here that wants to ask me questions.
I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, put my email address.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably the best
sure.
thing. They can just email me personally,
and we'll put your website.
Yeah,
address
that's
on there.
fine. Yeah, put those links up there.
And the website is it Joel Behrman Trumpet?
It's JoelBehrman.com.
Joel Behrman. Wow, you got just your name.
Yeah, I bought the domain
wow.
and then I managed to keep it, I think.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I was just on it. Yeah. So you still got it.
I'm good. I think I have it on like auto renew or something.
Oh, okay. There you go.
That way I really am hands off when it comes to my own.
Yeah. I couldn't do Jeff Lewis. There's so many of us. It was like, there's no way.
There's no way.
Right.
Yeah, I'm lucky. There's one other Joel Behrman that I know of that's like a photographer or something.
Okay.
Like that, so.
All right. So you got Joel Behrman Trump, just JoelBehrman.com.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Joel.
Oh, thank you, man.
I didn't expect to go this long, but I could actually go another hour. But I want to fry you easily.
Yeah.
Trumpet Talk.
Oh, it's so fun. Let's do volume 2.
Volume 2. I'm down. Yeah. All right. Once again, thank you so much for Joel Behrman coming out today.
Yeah, my pleasure.
All right. Man.
Take care, y'all.
All right. Thank you so much for tuning in to my very first interview with Joel Behrman. If you want to know a little bit more about Joel, you can visit him on his website at joelbehrman.com. JoelBehrman. JoelBehrman.com. If you want to get a little bit more information on me and download some free cool stuff, be sure to visit my website, jefflewistrumpet.com. And if you subscribe to my email list, you will receive 11 scales for jazz improvisation for free. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will catch you in the next podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Jeff Lewis Trumpet Podcast at www.jefflewistrumpet.com.